They shoved the new kid into the mud, laughing as his belongings scattered. But when he stood up, something in his eyes changed, and in seconds, the bullies were the ones on the ground. No one could believe what they saw. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Noah's palms were damp inside his sleeves, but he refused to wipe them. Any sudden movement could trigger them. He stayed frozen, gaze fixed somewhere between Troy's sneering face and the cracked concrete underfoot. Around them, the sounds of Roosevelt High ebbed and flowed, lockers slamming shut, shouts from a distant basketball court, a shrill laugh from a group of cheerleaders. But here, beneath the gnarled old oak, a silence coiled between the four boys, tight as a spring. Troy took a step closer, his boots scuffing the dirt. "So, what's your story, new kid?" he drawled, tone dripping with mockery. Noah stayed quiet. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Stay calm. Stay small. Stay ready." Caleb snickered, exchanging a quick glance with Brent, whose arms were crossed like a bouncer at a nightclub. The way they flanked Troy wasn't random. It was a practiced formation, a predator's cage designed to suffocate. They had done this before, and they would do it again, unless someone taught them fear. Troy reached down and towed the scattered remains of Noah's lunch, a flattened sandwich and a snapped pencil, without breaking eye contact. He grinned. "Oops. Guess you're gonna have to clean that up, huh?" Noah blinked slowly. His heart hammered against his ribs so loudly it drowned out everything else. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run. Yet he stayed rooted, not from fear, but from choice. Not yet. A crowd had started to gather at the edges, students pretending not to watch, pretending not to care, all while their phones hovered casually at their sides. Roosevelt High had rules about fights, about bullying, but everyone knew those rules were just window dressing. In the real order of things, Troy and his pack set the hierarchy, and the teachers stayed conveniently blind. Troy's smirk widened when he noticed the crowd. Public humiliation, the sweetest kind. "You deaf or just stupid?" he barked, voice carrying farther than necessary. The insult splintered the tense quiet. A ripple of suppressed laughter ran through the spectators, cowardly and small. Noah breathed in slowly through his nose. Beneath the shame, beneath the trembling muscles that begged to lash out, there was a razor-thin calm sharpening within him. He wasn't the same boy who had run from his last school. He had made a promise. To his father, to himself. Today wasn't going to end the way Troy expected. But for now, Noah only looked down, letting the moment build like a gathering storm, unseen but inevitable. The backpack hit the ground with a sickening thud, its contents spilling out like a lifeline severed in front of strangers. Pages fluttered against the cracked concrete, pens rolled into muddy puddles, a history textbook split open at the spine. And there, half buried in the dirt, glinted a worn photograph. His father's proud, uniformed smile frozen forever in a cheap plastic frame. Troy towered above it all, arms spread wide as if presenting a spectacle. "Oops," he crowed, voice oily and triumphant, slicing through the courtyard's rising din. Noah moved instinctively, dropping to his knees, hands fumbling for the picture. His fingers closed around it, but not before a layer of grit scraped across his father's face. For a single breath, the world narrowed to just that photograph, its edges worn from years of hiding it in jacket pockets and old shoeboxes during endless relocations. In his mind, a different image flickered. Late nights on the military base, his father guiding his trembling hands into fists, whispering control is power, son. Never let rage write your story. The echo of laughter shattered the memory like glass. Noah straightened, clutching the dirt-smeared photo to his chest, but Brent's shove came fast and merciless. Noah stumbled forward, boots slipping, and crashed down into the oozing mud that clung to the courtyard's roots like rot. The cold filth soaked through his jeans, his palms skidding raw against the gravel beneath. His forehead grazed the sharp edge of a rock, but he hardly felt it. Above him, the laughter reached a fever pitch, not just from Troy and his crew, but from a dozen others, students who barely knew him but found power in his public undoing. He felt it. The tide of ridicule, the sick warmth of cruelty passed like currency from one bystander to the next. Noah stayed down, breathless, the mud seeping into his skin, into his bones. Hatred, thick and electric, rose like a noxious fog inside him. It wasn't fear tightening his jaw now. It was fury. Fury that tasted metallic and cold. Fury sharpened by every whispered taunt at every new school, by every fake smile and every broken promise that this time would be different. It coiled around his ribs, burning hotter with every second he stayed kneeling in the dirt. He pressed his fist into the mud, grinding it into the earth like a silent vow. Not fear, not sadness. Never again. Only hatred remained. Noah rose slowly, each movement deliberate, as if he were shedding the weight of the mud, the shame, the entire world pressing against him. Dirty water dripped from his sleeves, streaking his skin like war paint. His face, moments ago a canvas of humiliated restraint, now hardened into a mask, emotionless, unreadable, impenetrable. Troy barked a cruel laugh, mistaking Noah's eerie calm for defeat. "Look at this little mud rat," he jeered, turning to his audience for approval. The crowd chuckled nervously, half distracted by the buzzing phones raised at the edges, their cameras hungrily catching every second. But as Troy reached out and grabbed Noah's shoulder, intending to spin him like a rag doll for their entertainment, the atmosphere shifted. Noah moved, fast, clean, decisive. In one fluid snap, Noah seized Troy's wrist, twisting it outward with bone-cracking force. Before Troy could even yelp, Noah pivoted low, drove his center of gravity under Troy's hips, and flipped him over his shoulder. Troy slammed into the ground with a bone-jarring thud. The air punched violently from his lungs. He lay sprawled, eyes wide, chest heaving like a fish on a dock. The courtyard froze. No one laughed now. Caleb, running on pure instinct and wounded pride, charged forward, fists swinging with reckless desperation. But Noah, seeing the telegraphed punches from a mile away, simply leaned aside, letting Caleb's momentum betray him. With a subtle hook of his foot, Noah tripped him mid-swing. Caleb pitched forward, helpless, and hit the dirt face first with a wet slap, his nose smearing mud in a grotesque streak. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Brent, larger but slower, hesitated for a heartbeat too long. He saw the precision, the merciless efficiency Noah unleashed, and instinctively began stepping back. Fear flickered in his eyes, a crack in the armor of his assumed invincibility. But Noah didn't wait. He surged forward, cutting the distance in 2 strides. His elbow drove into Brent's ribs like a hammer, catching the big senior off guard and pinning him against the gnarled tree. Brent wheezed in agony, folding around the impact as his body sagged against the trunk. For a fraction of a second, time stretched thin. 3 predators, moments ago kings of their tiny kingdom, now lay broken and gasping at the feet of the boy they had mistaken for prey. The air buzzed, thick with disbelief and the sharp electric scent of fear. Phone cameras captured it all, the mud-streaked warrior standing tall, the crumpled bodies around him, the stunned faces of the crowd that had once laughed. In less than 20 seconds, the hierarchy of Roosevelt High had shattered into dust, and Noah hadn't even broken a sweat. Troy wheezed as he pushed himself up on shaking arms, his once unshakable bravado leaking away with every gasping breath. Dirt clung to his face, his shirt was smeared with mud, and his eyes, wild with disbelief, searched the crowd for answers he wouldn't find. "What the hell, man?" he coughed, voice cracking under the weight of his own humiliation. Noah stood above him, a towering figure of calm in the chaos he had carved. He wiped a smear of grime from his cheek with the back of his hand, then leveled a gaze so cold and unflinching that Troy flinched instinctively. "You picked the wrong target," Noah said, each word slicing through the thick silence like a blade drawn clean across stone. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the clamor, the heavy thud of hurried footsteps, the sharp bark of authority. Teachers stormed into the courtyard, faces twisted in confusion, bracing for a typical after-school brawl. But what they found stopped them cold. Roosevelt's self-appointed kings sprawled like fallen statues, groaning and broken at the feet of the new kid who didn't even seem out of breath. Principal Harris, a barrel-chested man with a permanent scowl, elbowed through the stunned teachers and students alike. His face turned a dangerous shade of red as he surveyed the scene. "Up! Now!" he snapped, voice like a whip crack. He yanked Troy, Caleb, and Brent up by their collars, ignoring their feeble protests, their desperate glances toward the still-gathered students. There would be no mercy today, no quiet dismissal under the rug. The whole school had seen. As the bullies were marched away, heads bowed in disgrace, the crowd parted like a tide around Noah. For the first time, they didn't look at him with contempt or amusement. They looked at him with something closer to reverence, respect carved from the oldest currency there was, fear, courage, and the visible proof of strength. A girl with honey-blonde hair broke from the throng, her sneakers squelching softly in the muddy earth. Without a word, she bent down, picked up the dirt-smeared photograph from the ground, and wiped it carefully on her sleeve before offering it back to him. Her eyes met Noah's, steady and warm. "Your dad would be proud," she said simply. The words hit harder than any punch he had thrown. Noah took the photo gently, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest moment. A knot in his chest, one he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying for years, finally loosened. As he bent down to collect the scattered remains of his backpack, students stepped aside to clear his path. No jeering, no mock applause, just quiet acknowledgement. Noah slung the half-torn bag over his shoulder and began walking toward the school building. His steps were steady, his heart strangely light. Behind him, whispers stirred, not of mockery, but of myth, stories beginning to bloom in the fertile ground of awe. Noah Carter had come to Roosevelt High as a nobody. He was leaving the courtyard as something else entirely. Justice wasn't just served, it had been delivered with precision, and in the hearts of every witness, a new truth had taken root. This was Noah Carter's school now.